All right, up next on the agenda is House File 2499 from Representative Lee. As she's approaching the table, Representative Lee's going to move that House File 2499 be laid over for possible inclusion in the tax bill. Welcome to your committee, Representative Lee. I understand you have an amendment. It's in the packet titled DE1.
Yes.
Do you want to move the amendment, Representative Lee?
Yes, please. Let's move
All
the
right.
DE1.
Representative Lee moves the DE1 amendment. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. House File 2499 is amended. Representative Lee, to your bill.
Great. Thank you, Chair. So for folks who remember, last year we heard House File 2499, but because we've had a forecast, we needed to adopt the DE1 to just update the tax years and the amounts. And so want to just explain that a little bit. This year also, we wanted to highlight the impact of the renter's credit, given the changes in the 2023 trifecta tax bill that we passed, which made two really important changes. So I think these weren't emailed yesterday, but there's a printout, and I don't see the HDMI cord up here, so I'm not going to have a presentation on the screen, but if you'll refer to that, we got data from the Department of Revenue just showing the really real and important impact of one, streamlining the process for taxpayers to be able to claim the renter's credit by making it a part of the income tax form, and then two, modifying what we count as income from like taxing non-taxable income to just using AGI or adjusted gross income, which is a narrower definition of income, but also arguably a more fair definition of income because we're not counting non-taxable income. And so if you'll see here, there were two really important impacts. Nearly like 74,000 more people were able to take advantage of this really important program because we just made it easier for them to claim something that they already qualify for. And then you'll also notice that the average credit increased, let me see, very quickly, almost like $100. And we know that this is a direct impact of the narrower definition to AGI. The Department of Revenue told us that this would likely happen. You know, they had actually predicted that maybe like we would help 100,000 more people, but it turns out, you know, in effect it was maybe about 74,000. And part of that is we've talked a lot about here too about using like VITA and some of the tax preparers and making sure that like those people help out our neighbors when they're applying when they're filing their taxes to make sure that they are taking advantage of these programs. So I think there's like a little gap there, but you know, hopefully more and more people will start taking advantage of this. So that gap, right? There's about maybe a couple, 30,000 more people we can help. But the other thing is, you know, we could help even more people by enacting House File 2499 as amended by the DE1. And so, you know, the conversation today is about bringing the renter's credit up to parity with the homestead credit, which our colleague, Rep. Tabke, just talked about. This bill, as mentioned last year, does two things. It would nearly double the income cutoff for claimants by increasing the threshold from about $75,000 to $145,740. So it's pretty bad. Like our parity is definitely not there. And the second thing that this bill would do is it would raise the maximum credit to $3,560, which is almost a $1,000 increase from where it is now. And if you will refer to the latest revenue note, increasing the income cutoff would result in helping an estimated 80,000 additional taxpayers. And then increasing the maximum credit would allow people who currently take advantage of this to get an average of $560 more in their pockets. And that will potentially help 35,000 current taxpayers who use the renter's credit. So this is not an insignificant amount of money, and if we have an extra $300 million lying around, like we've been talking about potentially, right? We should ask ourselves how we can close the inequity between renters and homeowners, all of whom are being burdened by, increasing property taxes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my testifiers who can talk a little bit more about the really important impact of the renter's credit across the state.
Great, thank you so much, Representative Lee. Once again, we have a great House research publication on this topic in our packets. I think the illustrations in the table on the back are especially helpful just to understand the impact of this. And then I would just draw people's attention to how sort of renters pay property taxes in that second paragraph, because I think that we sometimes only think of homeowners when we're talking about property taxes, but we all pay property taxes. So thanks so much for making sure that was in the packet. All right, two testifiers. First up, Michael Dahl, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself as you get started.
Good morning, Chair Gomez and members of the committee. My name is Michael Dahl, and I'm the Public Policy Director with Homeline, a statewide tenant advocacy organization. Thank you for the opportunity to testify again in support of House File 2499. As I said last year, it's long been puzzling to me why there hasn't been parity between tenants and homeowners regarding property tax, and so I want to thank Representative Lee for addressing this issue of parity head on. The reality is that low-income renter households are struggling. For decades, renters have faced housing costs that rise faster than wages. According to the Minnesota Housing Partnership, there's a shortage of nearly 97,500 homes that are affordable and available to extremely low-income households. That means that for every 100 renters who need an affordable place to live, there are only 35 that are affordable or available to them. 35 units for every 100 that need them. So when I heard the number $500 as part of the relief that would be extended to the average renter, that makes me very happy, to say the least. Well, the housing committees will address the broader housing shortage issues. The renter's credit remains a vital source of support for struggling tenant households. By increasing the maximum credit and raising income limits, House File 2499 would ensure that more renters receive more meaningful assistance to meet their basic needs. At Homeline, we talk every day to renters about the renter's credit. They rely on this credit to purchase school supplies and clothing for their children. Some use it to address long-delayed needs, such as replacing broken eyeglasses or finally making a trip to the dentist. Others use the credit to take stock on household essentials and non-perishable groceries or simply meet car repairs. For many households, this provides a rare financial breathing room. For others, it allows them to catch up, like in paying back rent that they are overdue on. Achieving parity between renter's credit and the homestead credit is not only a matter of fairness, it's a practical step towards helping renters who are struggling to make ends meet move closer to financial stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Up next, Nan Madden. Welcome back to the committee. Please introduce yourself as you get started.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Nan Madden. I'm Director of the Minnesota Budget Project. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on House File 2499, and I'd like to thank Representative Lee for her ongoing attention to the differences between Minnesota's property tax refunds for homeowners and renters. These differences sometimes have policy reasons behind them, but some are more arbitrary. Like all Minnesotans, Minnesota renters want safe, affordable homes for themselves and their families. But some folks earning low wages or on fixed incomes do struggle to afford both the cost of housing and other basic necessities. The renter's credit is one of the strategies that the state uses to reduce one of the costs of housing, which is the property tax portion of those housing costs, and it does so for workers, families, seniors, and people living with disabilities. The renter's credit refunds a portion of the property taxes that qualifying renters have paid through their rents. And as you've heard, under this bill, the maximum amount of renter's credit and the income limit to qualify would both be increased to mirror what's available to homeowners. At the same time, the bill would maintain the sliding scale structure for the renter's credit and continue to provide the largest refunds for the most struggling Minnesotans. I've also provided a handout to the committee about the importance of the renter's credit to people in every Minnesota county. In tax year 2023, more than 310,000 Minnesota households received the renter's credit, and they are found in every part of the state. In Greater Minnesota in particular, the renter's credit is an important strategy for ensuring our elders can afford to continue living in their communities. In 2023, 30% of households who received the renter's credit included seniors or people living with disabilities. And in 22 counties in Greater Minnesota, at least half of the participating households included seniors or people with disabilities. As you heard, the impact of the renter's credit was even stronger in 2024 after the major policy changes to the renter's credit went into effect for the first time. That Minnesotans now file for their renter's credit when they file their state income taxes instead of on a separate property tax application. And filing became simpler because the renter's credit is based on adjusted gross income. And as you heard, there was greater participation in the renter's credit as a result. And the data from the Department of Revenue suggests that likely the majority of the new filers are folks who already did qualify for the renter's credit but were not previously filing for it. An expansion of the renter's credit, such as the changes outlined in this bill, would provide a financial boost to the Minnesotans who receive it, as well as for their local communities as renters spend their refunds on rent, groceries, or other basics. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Nan Madden. All right, is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on this bill? Not seeing any. We'll move to member discussion. Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rep. Lee, for bringing this bill forward. I think this is something that we've been working on for a couple of years to get that parity between renters and homeowners. I think it's really important also to at least, say to renters that where they live is also just as valuable as where homeowners live, and they should be able to reap those same benefits. So I appreciate you for bringing this bill forward, and I hope that we can be able to do something with it this year.
Thank you, Representative Agbaje. Representative Roach.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what she's trying to do here, Representative Lee's trying to do here, but the reality is the way we solve this problem is to stop putting mandates on counties. I mean, property taxes are going through the roof because we're forcing mandates on counties, whether it's paid family medical leave, African American Preservation Act. That affects these low-income, individuals the most. And so this is a Band-Aid approach on, a wound that's hemorrhaging. It's just like, it's so backwards. You want to solve the problem, end the mandates.
Representative Anderson.
Oh,
Thank you,
can I
Madam.
respond to that?
Yeah, actually, sorry, Representative Anderson. Let's go to Representative Lee first.
Yeah. thank you,
Representative
Chair.
Lee.
So I wanted to thank Representative Roach for just drawing attention to, the testimonies we heard last week from the counties that I think beforehand, right, like they were already facing a crisis, but because of HR 1 and the Senate Reconciliation Act, it is clear the federal government is stealing, taxpayer dollars from counties and state governments to pay for corporate tax cuts and, tax cuts for billionaires, right? Like, this is where our money is going. So it's not just, things that that taxpayers in Minnesota pay money to which we expect counties to do, right? Like, we can't, I would say, we pay taxes to make sure that, EMS comes when we call for it, right? We pay taxes to fund our schools. But what has happened is that our federal government has decided that in order to quote unquote balance the budget or like finance these corporate tax cuts and tax cuts to billionaires, they are taking money away from our county governments and our state governments. And so that's unrelated to this, but like a really important thing to realize. And again, something that I didn't mention in this presentation, but something that I mentioned last year, in 1983, when the Minnesota legislature first put income limits on the property tax refund program for both homeowners and renters, that income limit was $40,000. And like Ms. Madden mentioned, there's been a lot of stuff that the legislature has done to the program for both homeowners and renters in the last 40 or so years. But the income limit for homeowners has continued to follow inflation, whereas the income limit for renters has not. And so there's a huge disparity, and that's why we have to fix this, because it's very clear that both homeowners and renters pay property taxes, and for some reason, folks in the legislature have not prioritized the needs of renters. And I'd venture it's because most of the people in the legislature have been homeowners and not necessarily renters. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Representative, I think all of us were renters at one point, so I just want to, I understand the logic why we have a homeowner's property tax credit for low-income folks, and I support that. But that's not what this bill is. This goes up all the way to $150,000. And I think we've discussed in this committee, both sides of that the tax policy is about our values too. And one thing that is very important, we know from every study out there, is that people that are in, that actually own their home that is one of the most stable things, is to get folks into that bucket of going from renting to owning a home. And that is something that we've always, from a public policy standpoint, we've always supported. And we should incentivize, frankly, people, whether that's first-time homebuyer money, whatever, but we should be incentivizing that rather than incentivizing folks that are making $150,000 a year, which I would absolutely say is not low income or even medium income, but incentivizing them to rent. So that's the reason the public policy, I think, has been this way historically, and I support that. So thank you.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Chair. So the bill would increase the maximum income limit to $147,000, and that's close to $150,000. But so when you do the quick math, that's mom and dad making $75,000 a year. That is not being rich, and especially with increased gas prices and food prices. That's getting harder and harder for people to actually raise families and have disposable income. And so, that's very much middle class, and that is what this bill is supposed to help. And, the other piece is I absolutely agree that owning a home is one of the best and easiest ways for low-income and middle-income families to build wealth. But we know that, in the last 10 years, the average age of a first-time home owner has increased, I think, like tenfold. And it's harder and harder for millennials, like people my age, to actually buy homes because of, private equity and like all the folks who are buying up, all the companies buying up homes, right? And so that is something that we can look at, but, that's like, we should do, as much as we can, right? Like it's a yes and this is not, I'd say, I don't think this incentivizes people to rent. I think people rent out of necessity, right? Like if you don't have the down payment to buy a home, like you're gonna have to rent. So, it's a yes and.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Just very shortly, I think we agree on some of this stuff, but I'm not saying it incentivizes to rent, but it doesn't de-incentivize. When people are looking at buying a house for the first time, they're looking at what are the tax savings, what are the, the whole package, not just the payment interest, the PITI, but the whole package. What does this do? And we should be incentivizing, if we're going to put money somewhere, we should be putting money to incentivize and help people actually buy. So that's, I think, where the discrepancy is. So, but otherwise, I agree that it's hard for young folks harder to buy houses. So, thank you. That's all I have.
Chair Howard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Lee, for bringing this bill forward. Since we're talking housing, I couldn't pass up the chance to just offer a couple comments. One, to Representative Anderson's point, we do subsidize homeownership quite a bit to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars through the mortgage interest deduction, and that's not income tested at all. And, we've talked about in housing a lot, when we talk about barriers to homeownership, the two things that come up the most are securing a level of down payment. So we do invest in things like first-time down payment, that makes sense. But part of it is just making sure that folks that are renting can accrue enough wealth to be able to make that down payment. And so getting to better parity with the renter's credit is going to help people move from renter to home ownership. And of course, the other thing we do is build a heck of a lot more homes, and that's the other barrier is we just don't have enough homes, and we need to look at policy and incentive processes to do that as well. No, that's a whole longer discussion, but that just wanted to offer those comments.
Yeah, and thanks, Chair Howard. I should also
Representative Lee.
mention that, thank you, Chair. I should also mention that when renters are surveyed on like how they use their renter's credit money, oftentimes, right, like they're using that for medical necessities or like purchases that they've been holding off. And so I think it is really hard for people to save money, to save enough to, get a down payment to buy a home. And so like, again, this bill bringing up parity to the homestart credit would allow folks to start that and maybe, one day be able to buy a home because, again, also increasing gas prices and food, like it's really difficult for people to save money and also afford their necessities.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Hewitt?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I love using my real estate knowledge because I just am excited. So homeownership, yeah, it's a goal of many people, not a goal of all. Taking on a home is totally a whole set of expenses that no one expects, from mowing the grass to the water heater that goes out overnight. What's burdening our first-time home buyers right now is the debt they bring into the situation. It's not just making the 150, which we think is a lot. It's not anymore because of numerous other expenses that people have. Student loans is one of the top things that takes a homeowner out of the market. The next one is credit card debt that they had that oops or some kind of medical expense. They're out of the market. So you're seeing that 150 category, it sounded great in the 80s. I never thought we'd ever see that, but now it's nothing. And they don't even have money to put into retirements. They don't have money to put in anything. So when I'm working with these buyers, and on top of that, a lot of people want to go conventional, saves them a few points, which is 20% down. Their parents are still paying off their student loans, so they can't help them. So we go to the FHA market, which is 6%, and that's still a lot to put down. So I think you're seeing a lot more people stay in the rental market, which, it doesn't always make me happy, but I don't want to see them in this burdensome of expenses they have in the rental market either. If we can get them stabilized in that market, it's a lot more easier to bring them up to the home ownership level. So Representative Lee, I really think this is a great bill, and I think I might be on it. But no, I think that this is, yeah, I think this is really where we need to go is stabilize them in that market, because the other thing I want to talk about in Representative Roach's area, we were in the same county, by the way, but what you see is urban sprawl here too, because I know that the more affordable homes are in Representative Roach's area, and as we move down to Elko and stuff. So we are putting affordable homes in those areas, but even that area there doesn't have bus transit or doesn't have the services they need to get to their jobs or clinic appointments. So I think that we're in a real big area here, and I think we do have to help our renters out. And then as we move them along, hopefully they can be, if they want to, be homeowners. Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Hewitt. Any further member discussion? Representative Smith.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Lee. I am a co-author on this bill, and I'm a renter. I think it's worth saying as we talk about the values of home ownership that also a lot of people do choose to be renters, or because of life scenarios, they are just renters. I live in a very transient community where people are in Rochester for a couple of years for schooling or for treatment, and are renting during that time, and then are moving either back or somewhere else. And the underlying idea of this bill is that renters are just as deserving of help when their costs of the place that they live go up because of property taxes increases as those who own their homes or as their landlords who own the property. I think that is a good principle that we should all agree with. And I'm thankful for this bill, underlying that principle, and happy to be a co-author on it. So thank you, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Anything further? Representative Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just thank the committee for the robust discussion. And I think just to underscore how important this is, I know we typically talk about this program as helping some of the lowest income Minnesotans in Minnesota, but some of the trends that we're seeing is also that increasingly more middle-class Minnesotans are actually using this. And so when we look at the Tax 22 and Tax 23 numbers, the percentage of people with like a max 40,000 K per year has actually decreased. And because we know that like usage of this program has increased, this means more like middle income people are actually using this. And then the other trend is, Ms. Madden mentioned that in tax year 23, 22 greater Minnesota counties had at least half of the participants half of the participating households either have seniors or someone living with a disability in it. And so that's an increase from tax year 22. So, it's while this program is helping more middle income folks in Minnesota, this is increasingly helping more seniors and people living with disabilities. And so just some trends to keep in mind as we think about, how we use tax dollars and how we choose to help property taxpayers. And really the fact that, right, like, everyone pays property taxes, and like apparently, there's this kind of subconscious or unconscious decision to help homeowners, but like not renters, and like that is not okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lee. With that, Representative Lee is going to renew her motion that House File 2499 as amended be laid over for possible inclusion in the tax bill. It is laid over.